Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our continuing series on the Sega Saturn. We're going to be taking a look at today is Burning Rangers, released in 1998. It was one of the last games released on the Saturn, and it definitely shows because this game looks absolutely incredible for a 3D Saturn game. Now the Saturn always takes a lot of crap because people say that it wasn't as powerful as the PlayStation 1, and the reality was it was just incredibly difficult to program for. You had dual CPUs and then VDP1 and VDP2, so to get the most out of the system you had to be programming for 4 independent chips, which is much more difficult than something like the Nintendo 64 or the PlayStation 1 where you have one CPU and one GPU. The Sega Saturn was definitely a lot messier of a system to code for. But towards the end of its life, you can see here, this game looks awesome. Now granted, there's a little bit of slowdown in the frame rate when you see those explosions, but you get this real-time lighting effect, and everything just looks really great. It's colorful, it pops, it really shows what the Sega Saturn was capable of once the coders had a really good handle on it towards the end of its life. But as far as the game itself is concerned, and that's what we talk about here is games, I absolutely love Burning Rangers, and I regret having sold my copy back when I bought it. I traded it in for like $2 to $3 at GameStop for some games, and it now goes for hundreds upon hundreds of dollars as a US copy. I have the Japanese copy, it's much cheaper, and it can be a little bit more difficult to play because that dialogue you hear is giving you some navigational cues, but with just basic exploration or reading a walkthrough, you'll definitely be able to get through the game. But as far as what the game is, it's a 3D fire combat simulator. That's what genre I'm going to call it. It's basically, obviously you can tell, you're in a third-person view, and you're basically trying to fight these fires back. You are a space fireman or a burning ranger, and you have to collect these gems because you're going to find people to rescue throughout the game, and to be able to teleport them, you're going to need a certain count of gems to be able to send them along their way. But every time you get hit, just like in a Sonic game, all those gems are going to come out of you, and you're going to have to fight to get them back. So it's definitely a resource management game in the fact that you need to be careful of the fire and always making sure that you have enough resources, because what you don't want to do is find a victim to save and then not be able to do it, because then you're going to have to backtrack through the game, find more crystals, and you're not on a time limit, but you're on a fire limit. You'll see that percentage bar in the top right corner. If that gets to 100, it's going to be game over because there is too much fire. So you have to make sure that you don't let things get out of control when they burn. And I do like this particular stage area right here, because when you come in, it has that kind of Resident Evil third-person camera, and it shows you a lot of the verticality of the game, because you're able to jump quite high, and you have those hover boots and boosters, so you can really scale really high up in certain areas. So the game feels a lot less linear, because some doors need to be activated by buttons, but there are some areas where you can just freely explore, and some things might not be to where you want to go. And you'll see there I got hit and lost all my crystals again. When you hear that whooshing noise, if you do a full circle on the D-pad, what's going to happen is you're going to do a backflip and avoid it. But you can see there now that I did lose those crystals, I don't have enough to rescue the hostage. When I said hostage, I guess they're hostage of the fire, the victim there. So we need to be able to find them, because you don't want to leave anyone behind to continue on in the game. You need to be rescuing these people. It can definitely get challenging at spots, especially when that percentage meter gets going on the fire, because you have to make sure you kill enough fire with your gun, put those fires out so that the game doesn't just end because you go over that certain threshold. So it's definitely a push and pull between exploring, putting the fires out, collecting gems, and looking for the victims. But it's definitely a game that shows that the Sega Saturn was quite powerful, because I think this looks as good as anything the PlayStation 1 could do. Especially now that we're in this dark, we get this colored light as we turn around, and it accurately, I say reflects off the surfaces, and there's different colors. So it really shows that the Sega Saturn was quite capable when developers knew exactly what they were doing with all the silicon in the machine, and were able to coax out all the power from it. But that, in fact, is the issue when you have too complicated of a device. If you have a lot of different chips in there, sometimes people won't program for them efficiently, or sometimes they'll just leave them off completely. The Atari Jaguar is a great example of that, where developers use the Motorola 68000 processor versus the actual processors in the machine just to get a game out. I mean, obviously that's a little bit of a tangent, but the Saturn is the same. Not every developer used both Hitachi CPUs. Some only used one, and that's why you see this big range in performance on Saturn, and that's how it gets that reputation of not being as powerful a system as it could be. But Burning Rangers absolutely just kills that idea and shows you that outside of some transparency issues, the Saturn could keep up with anything else. And Burning Rangers is one of my favorite games on the Saturn, and definitely when I was picking 10 games I wanted to talk about to show that the Saturn is an awesome piece of hardware to collect for and own, it was one of the first games that came up on my list. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to let you watch a little bit of the gameplay, get some of that ambient sound effect, and I'll come back and talk more about Burning Rangers, but I want you just to hear a little bit of the game and enjoy what soundtrack it does have. But I'll be back in just a second and we'll talk more about Burning Rangers.
どこかのドアが開いたわ。戻って。右に曲がって。その付近にスイッチがあるみたいね。
中に生存者がいるの？
今下に博士が降りていかれて。
分かった。もう安心してね。
転送座標確認。転送開始。転送を確認。ジリス、至急下に向かって。
了解。
So while this is an awesome game for the Saturn and one of my favorites, I will say that one of the downsides is longevity. There is only 4 stages in the game, and when you beat those, the only thing that unlocks is a random generated level set. So there's like over 3,000, according to the internet, versions of the levels that you can play, but honestly, once you've gotten through the main campaign, that's not going to hold that much appeal for too long. So while the game is amazing, it looks great, it plays great, and it sounds great, I will say that you're not going to get the most gameplay out of it, and for that fact, unless you're looking for a Saturn full set, I really just recommend picking up the Japanese version. Like I said, it's more difficult to play because there is no map. What you're hearing when you hear that woman speak Japanese is giving you navigational clues as to where you want to go. So you're definitely going to have a harder game if you play in Japanese and don't speak the language. I actually think that's to its benefit because I like trying to discover where things are, and it makes the game harder so you actually beat it in a much slower pace, which I appreciate. When I played this in the English version when I had it back in the 90s, I think I probably beat it in 2 sittings, and that for a $60 game back then was a lot to ask, and now with the price that Burning Rangers is commanding, I definitely think that you're not going to get your money to play through value in there. But if you're going for a full set, definitely pick it up because you kind of have to. And it definitely shows that Sega had a lot with the Saturn hardware. Granted, when they first developed it, they thought 2D was going to be still big, and then when Sony came around with the PlayStation 1 designs, they realized that the advent of 3D in home technology was definitely happening, and they had to pivot. And that's why you see a range of graphical fidelity in 3D games on the Saturn, everything from absolute hot dumpster fire garbage to things like Burning Rangers. On the downsides, the Saturn definitely has a lot of texture clipping and some warping, but that's not anything that we didn't see on the PlayStation 1. But you see there with those textures moving and whatever that device is in the background, maybe a power core, there is a lot of visual flair, and you can kind of forgive some of the texture clipping and warping because it is a Saturn game and the PlayStation 1 had those same problems. But when this was reviewed in the 90s, it did take some hits for that, but I think that it was popular kind of to just criticize the Saturn because it did have so many flaws. I feel like reviewers definitely leaned on the issues that they could see to kind of take the scores down, because I would say if I was reviewing this in the 90s, I would give it a 9 out of 10, and I think, maybe an 8 out of 10 now as time has gone on. But I'm really surprised Sega never did anything else with this franchise, especially on the Dreamcast, because, it was a popular game, it did review well, but it is just a one-off game. And now that we're here getting towards the boss, you have to do a little bit of platforming. The controls can definitely be touchy. It takes a long time to get used to them, and that's just kind of part and parcel of learning how to play the game. When you play it a lot, you get much better at it, but you're definitely going to have a little bit of struggle with the camera and with the controls. But honestly, in this generation of 3D gaming, that was always going to happen. Even Mario 64, considered one of the best 3D games of the generation, the camera would still fight you. And I do like that we get boss battles at the end of every stage. It's this giant Aubrey from Little Shop of Horrors looking plant, and you have to charge your gun to be able to do any damage, because that gun does have 2 stages, a charged attack and then just basically a burst shot. But the boss fights are really good, the music's great in them, and it definitely gives you a little something extra to do at the end of each stage. But I definitely can't highly recommend Burning Rangers enough. I absolutely love the game, it's one of my favorites on Saturn, and even if it does have a few graphical flaws and some control issues, it's definitely still something that I absolutely think you should play if you own a Saturn, or if you pick one up, you definitely want to play it. High marks from me. But short of that, that is Burning Rangers, an awesome game on the Sega Saturn. We hope you enjoyed watching the episode. If you could do us a huge favor, go down below and hit like and subscribe. Definitely helps us out because it takes a long time to make each one of these episodes. If you have any questions, pop them in the comment below. Otherwise, enjoy that flower dying, and we will see you on Tuesday with another episode in our Saturn series. And we'll be back on Friday and Sunday with videos as well. But thanks so much for watching. We appreciate it. Bye-bye.
無事プラント制御システムを停止。要救助者は救急施設に転送完了。鎮火作業は